Be inspired, supported, and empowered. This is the Global Healthy Living Foundation podcast network.
I failed at over probably up to about 60 medications and devices so far, and I started looking around for alternatives, and I started reading about psychedelics and the possibility of them being helpful with treating pain.
Welcome to Talking Head Pain, the podcast that confronts head pain head on. Hi, I'm Joe Koh, Director of Education Digital Strategy at the Global Healthy Living Foundation and a migraine patient for over 20 years. I'm here today with Alan Kaplan. He's the founder of a new organization and website called NDPHaware that stands for New Daily Persistent Headache. It's a project that started under clusterbusters.org, which is a nonprofit organization that we've worked with and been friends with for a very long time. So I'm delighted to connect with Alan to talk about this new initiative and nonprofit organization that is developed. Hi, Alan. How are you today?
I'm good, Joe. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. So can you tell our audience, they might be familiar with what New Daily Persistent Headache is. Can you explain when you first started to get a headache and how that feels and if that was your worst attack?
New Daily Persistent Headache, just for definition purposes, the way I look at it, new, and the way the international classification looks at it, it's basically a headache that kind of comes out of nowhere, something you've not really had previously. It's not from a different headache condition, so it kind of comes out of nowhere. At least for me, it came out of nowhere. And most people remember the onset or near about the onset. For me, it's around the first, second week of December of 2017. I guess celebrate, or some other people say, the crap-anniversary of your headache. Daily meaning it's every day, it's 365. Persistent meaning it's 24/7, and headache is just one part of the description as far as the symptomology and how it presents. Besides headache pain, you get a lot of similar symptoms that people with other headache diseases like migraine, with photophobia, sound problems, barometric pressure changes, nausea. What else I get? Neck, shoulder pain, brain fog, word finding, things like that. As far as what was the worst headache or experience with this, it's kind of hard to say, because I look at it as I've had one headache for the past 1,820 some odd days since this thing started. And the only difference really is how the pain levels just kind of bounce around. I could be a 2, a 4, a 6, a 10, and back down the scale, and all in the same day as far as pain levels go.
How is living with this for the past 5 years impacted your day-to-day life?
I say somewhat dramatically. It affected my work. I was working at the time when I developed this, and I kind of lasted about 2 years of having it, where I finally realized I just can't function at this level and at the level I want to function at with my job. And I was getting close to retirement age anyway, so I figured it's probably a good time to bow out. It affects your family, how you deal with your family, affects your friends, the activities you do. I cancel a lot of things. I'm at the point right now after 5 years where I don't make a lot of plans. I have plans in my head, but I don't necessarily voice them until I know I'm ready to do something. I might plan a trip, or I might plan to go to a concert or things like that. But, any given moment, I can get hit with a spike, and that's the end of the plan. So it's difficult.
And is there any understanding for you or others on what happens that one day you don't have a headache and then the next day you have a headache that lasts for 5+ years?
They don't know exactly what causes NDPH, similar to other headache diseases. Mine, like I said, came out of nowhere. There are a lot of people in the community where it could have been a result of a viral infection, a concussive event, stressful event in their life. COVID is coming up lately over the past, it's almost 3 years since COVID started, and that seems to be a potential cause. I know you had Dr. Robbins on, and he spoke to that recently, and something that we do hear about.
The prevalence, you're a man with this disease. A lot of the people I talk to in the migraine community are women or women identified. Is it an equal prevalence in men and women? Does it skew like cluster more men?
Well, if you go by looking at the support groups and the Facebook groups, it's like 80% women versus 20% men that are engaged in the support groups. But I think it's probably closer to 60-40, 50-50. I don't think anybody is immune from it. We are in the process. One of our goals with NDPHaware as an organization is research, education, advocacy, and what we have coming up is a formal patient-based survey that's going to be coming out in the spring that will give us more data, something that's pretty well lacking with NDPH. As far as I know, there has not been a patient survey out there ever. There was a doctor in Houston, Dr. Evans, did a study a few years ago, which was more of a chart study over a 10-year period from his patients, but nothing where the patients themselves are getting the chance to be heard. So when that's done, we'll have a lot more information.
How did you find these support groups, and did you feel that the social media around it resonated with your experience?
Yeah, well, Facebook, of course, has a million groups, and just did a search on that, and there was a couple of NDPH support groups. There's two big ones on Facebook right now that are basically, I guess, the go-to for people with NDPH. There's some overlapping into the chronic migraine groups as well. Google, of course, you can find anything you want on Google, and so. But the Facebook thing seems to be the most responsive, and it was a good place to start, just to understand what was I going through? Why do I have this? I didn't ask for this. It's not something I would have, put on my wish list for anybody. And with the support groups, if you get the right people, you can get a good understanding of what the disease is all about. There's a lot of people asking about medications and things like that, but you get deeper into, like you said, how is it affecting your life? What's, how do you cope with that? What kind of different strategies are available to help, get some kind of relief.
And why did you start a website and organization, NDPHaware.org?
It's my third year. I was kind of running out of medications. I've gone through pretty much everything that they throw at people with migraine and other headache diseases. There's no approved medication for NDPH that the doctor can prescribe. So, okay, you have NDPH, take this. That's not the case. So we're basically borrowing medications from everybody else, the CGRP medications that are new out there these days, and whether it's injectable or IV or whatever it might be, plus all the old standards back from years ago, with the triptans and things like that. I failed at over probably up to about 60 medications and devices so far. And I started looking around for alternatives, and I started reading about psychedelics and the possibility of them being helpful with treating pain, chronic pain. And I started going that route. And in February of 21, I had a psychedelic experience, which the next day my pain levels would drop by 50%. And I was like, oh, this is insane. It's great. What do I do? How do I do with this information? Who do I talk to? And I started through Google, found other doctors that talked about headache doctors that talked about psychedelics and pain. And then I started, saw the information about Clusterbuster, and I reached out to Bob Wald and Eileen Brewer, and they were looking for other people with other diseases that may have had positive psychedelic experiences to help treat their pain. And some of the patients from Clusterbusters use psychedelics to help manage their cluster headache as well. And they've actually have a pretty robust community around that. Because of that, we got connected, and then they kind of started my advocacy. That was a year ago, June of 21. When I first met up with Bob and Eileen. And then, I went to a conference with her. They took me to a CHAMP conference that year. And then August, we kicked off NDPHaware. So it's kind of born out of my experience and gave me a vehicle to launch a way to find research, find scientific data that can help us deal with this disease.
Eileen and Bob are great. I
Yes.
consider them friends. And
Yes.
one of the first people I interviewed was from Clusterbusters, Joe McKay,
Mhm.
and he talked a bit about his experience with psychedelics and how that has helped. And there seems to be it's a really burgeoning area of exploration in many different ways. So it's really cool that you're putting your stake in the ground to help move the needle for headache patients.
Well, I believe there's something there, for pain. I know there's a lot of what everybody's seeing is more towards the mental health side of using psychedelics, and there's some talk, and there's been more over the past few months about how it relates to chronic pain. I'm untreated basically at this point. I'm trying medications here and there, but basically I don't have anything in my toolbox that's a prescribed medication that I can use. And this is kind of what you're left with when you're dealing with a 24/7 pain condition and you need relief. And if you can find it, like anything else, you go where you find it. And if it helps, you use it, and regardless of whatever the consequences might be.
Just a reminder for our audience to discuss all the medications that you're taking, either prescribed or not prescribed, with your healthcare team so they know what's going on.
Which is what I've done. This stuff needs to be treated with respect.
Definitely. So what has this work taught you?
Patience, I guess, is probably the first thing. When this was first getting started, I first met Bob and Eileen, it was like, it just seemed like the wheels are just kind of grinding very slowly. The gears are grinding very slowly, moving forward. And then all of a sudden, once things were in place, things starts ramping up. So by the time I met them until the website was released in August, this past August, it just seemed like it was taking forever to get things done. But then everybody says this is just nonprofit is a very slow process in general. And so you get patient, you learn that, and you start building up your team and try to figure out what to do and how to do it. And it's been very interesting. It's been an interesting ride so far. And since I've kicked off the website and the organization, there's been a lot of positive feedback from the community and from doctors that I've talked to. I was at the Cluster Buster conference, and I met a few doctors there and to try to get some help, really, and support. And it's very rewarding. So the patience is key, and learning how to deal with yourself, and understanding how to manage the new lifestyle that I actually wouldn't call it a lifestyle. The new predicament I'm in, I would guess, would be more apropos for that. But I'm excited. I never did anything with nonprofit, except write some checks for donations here and there. But I think we have something going forward here that hopefully is going to pay dividends for the community, and hopefully the community can find some relief after we get some solid research into it.
Well, I really appreciate that you joined me today and that you gave me your first interview.
Well, thank you for
This is going to go down in history of
okay.
NDPHaware.
I hope so.
You heard it on Talking Head Pain first.
Well, thank you, Joe. I appreciate it.
Well, yeah, really appreciate your work, and it's important. And again, what I think is the big takeaway from the discussion is that even with diseases where we don't feel like there's a lot of innovation or that there's a lot of options, there are people like Alan who are pushing the boundaries, who are seeking out these physicians to help inform research and education around misunderstood diseases. So we really appreciate that work and look forward to watching you grow.
Thank you. We'll have to do a part 2.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Talking Head Pain, the podcast that confronts head pain head on. If you like this episode, please give it an honest 5-star rating and subscribe so you never miss another one. I'm Joe Coe, and I will see you next time.
Be inspired, supported, and empowered. This is the Global Healthy Living Foundation Podcast Network.